Narcissists thrive on control, admiration, and the sense that they can manipulate the world around them to suit their needs. They expect compliance, attention, and unquestioned validation, and when that expectation is challenged, their reaction can be intense. Today, we explore the dynamics that trigger their fury, not to provoke fear, but to empower you. Understanding what truly rattles a narcissist is less about them and more about reclaiming your own power. It is about realizing that when you stand firm, set boundaries, and refuse to let their behavior define your worth, you take control of your life. It is about discovering that the most powerful responses are often quiet, confident, and unwavering. When you know what makes a narcissist furious, you gain insight into your own strength and the ways you can navigate relationships with clarity, courage, and emotional independence. Today is about learning to move from reaction to mastery, from confusion to confidence, and from the influence of others to the sovereignty of your own peace, so that you can live with self-respect without needing to fight or prove yourself. Boundaries are not just rules for others. They are declarations of self-respect, of knowing what you will and will not accept in your life. When you set a boundary, you are asserting that your time, energy, and emotional well-being are not negotiable. For someone who thrives on control, manipulation, or constant validation, this is terrifying. Narcissists hate limits because limits expose the truth. They do not have the power you believed they did. They cannot bend you to their will or extract compliance simply because they demand it. Boundaries shift the balance, placing you back in charge of your own life and emotional landscape, and that is why they provoke such anger, frustration, or attempts at sabotage in my own life. Learning to set boundaries was transformative. For years, I allowed behaviors that drained me, dismissed my needs, and undermined my self-confidence. Every time I said yes when I meant no, every time I tolerated disrespect in the hope of keeping peace, I reinforced a pattern that left me feeling powerless. When I began identifying what was acceptable and what was not, I discovered a new kind of freedom. It was not easy. Setting limits triggers resistance from those who relied on your compliance. There may be anger, attempts at guilt, or even emotional manipulation, but standing firm became an act of courage and self-preservation. Each boundary reinforced my worth, and each time I maintained it, I felt more grounded, more authentic, and more in control. Boundaries also teach others how to treat you. They are not walls to shut people out, but markers that define respect and accountability. A narcissist, by nature, cannot tolerate these markers because they interfere with their illusion of dominance and entitlement. The discomfort they express is a reflection of your strength, not a weakness. Over time, I realized that their attempts to push, guilt, or provoke me were not personal failures on my part. They were reactions to the limits I had finally learned to enforce. Recognizing this allows you to respond from calm awareness rather than fear or guilt. You understand that boundary setting is not an act of cruelty, but an act of clarity. Setting boundaries also fosters self-trust. When you honor your own needs and emotions, you build confidence in your ability to navigate complex interactions without losing yourself. You stop over-explaining, justifying, or apologizing for simply existing on your terms. Boundaries are a form of self-respect that grows stronger with practice, and with that strength comes a sense of peace that cannot be shaken by manipulation. You learn that you are not responsible for someone else's reaction to your limits, and that their fury or discomfort is a reflection of their inability to control what cannot be controlled. The more consistently you enforce your boundaries, the less power their chaos has over you, and the more liberated and empowered you become in every aspect of your life. For much of my life, I measured my worth through the eyes of others, seeking approval, validation, and reassurance from those whose opinions often held no true alignment with my values or well-being. This need for external approval can be exhausting, especially when dealing with individuals who manipulate, criticize, or undermine. Over time, I realized that seeking validation from those incapable of giving it only kept me small, reactive, and dependent on their moods and judgments. True confidence, I learned, is not loud or performative. It is steady, quiet, and self-sustaining. It is the ability to stand tall, make choices aligned with your integrity, and honor your own perspective, even when others dismiss or challenge it. In my own journey, the shift from seeking approval to cultivating confidence was transformative. At first, it was uncomfortable. It required observing my own patterns of self-doubt, recognizing where I had sacrificed my needs for the comfort of someone else, and consciously choosing to trust my judgment. The process was gradual but empowering. Each decision made from self-trust rather than fear of judgment strengthened my sense of identity. I began to understand that approval is fleeting, subjective, and often manipulative, whereas self-confidence is enduring, rooted in knowledge of who I am and what I stand for. I stopped asking for permission to exist, to speak, or to act in alignment with my values. That shift gave me freedom and clarity. Confidence over approval also means detaching from the emotional influence of those who thrive on control or criticism. Narcissists and toxic individuals often attempt to provoke insecurity, shame, or guilt in order to maintain power. When your sense of worth is anchored internally, these attempts lose their potency. In my life, I noticed that the moment I no longer sought their nod of approval, the power dynamics changed. I could engage without fear, respond without defensiveness, and make choices without justification. The calm assurance that comes from self-reliance is profoundly disarming to those who try to control through judgment or manipulation. It is not aggression, it is presence, clarity, and unshakable self-respect. Living with confidence over approval also cultivates resilience. When you trust yourself, mistakes are no longer catastrophic, criticism is no longer debilitating, and setbacks are opportunities for growth rather than affirmations of inadequacy. I discovered that standing tall without validation is not arrogance, it is clarity. It is the understanding that your life, your emotions, and your path are yours to steward. This realization reshapes relationships, diminishes unnecessary conflict, and protects your peace. The more you root your self-worth internally, the less influence others, no matter how manipulative or critical, have over your happiness, and the more liberated and empowered you feel in every aspect of your existence. For much of my life, I unknowingly allowed my emotions to be controlled by the reactions of others, especially those who thrived on attention, manipulation, or admiration. Emotional independence is the conscious decision to no longer give your energy to fuel someone else's ego. It is about recognizing that your feelings, your worth, and your peace are not collateral in someone else's need to feel powerful or validated. Learning this distinction was transformative for me. It shifted my perspective from reacting to controlling my own inner world. I realized that when I tried to appease, argue, or justify myself to someone who was never going to understand, I was only strengthening their influence over my mind and heart. In my own experience, the path to emotional independence began with awareness. I started noticing the patterns that left me drained, moments when I felt compelled to defend myself, explain my choices, or absorb criticism that had no grounding in truth. Each time I resisted the urge to feed that energy into their ego, I reclaimed a fragment of my own power. I learned that my responses did not need to mirror their expectations. Silence, calm detachment, and refusal to engage in manipulative cycles became acts of strength. Over time, I saw that emotional independence was not a withdrawal from life or relationships, but a deliberate stance of self-preservation and clarity. It meant choosing peace over reaction, understanding over drama, and inner freedom over external control. Emotional independence also required redefining my sense of responsibility. I had to accept that I am not accountable for someone else's feelings, insecurities, or dissatisfaction. When a narcissist or manipulative person attempted to provoke guilt, shame, or fear, I could observe it without being swept away. This took practice. At first, it felt uncomfortable and even cruel to not respond to their need for validation. But with experience, I realized that withholding my emotional energy did not harm them. It protected me. It preserved my sense of self, my mental clarity, and my capacity to engage with the world authentically rather than reactively. Living in emotional independence reshaped my relationships and my internal life. I no longer chased approval, nor did I absorb blame that was not mine to carry. Each interaction became an opportunity to practice calm awareness rather than emotional submission. I discovered a profound sense of freedom in knowing that my peace could not be hijacked by anyone else. Emotional independence is not about detachment from empathy or love. It is about discerning where your energy belongs and refusing to allow it to become a tool for someone else's ego. The more I practiced this, the more empowered I felt, the clearer my boundaries became, and the deeper my connection to myself grew, allowing me to navigate life with unshakable confidence, strength, and clarity. For many years, I measured my power through engagement, through arguing, defending, or explaining myself to those who challenged me. I believed that visibility and reaction equaled influence, but over time I discovered a far deeper form of strength, silent strength. Calm detachment is the ability to observe without being pulled into chaos, to maintain your composure when provoked, and to refuse to react in ways that feed someone else's need for control. For individuals who thrive on manipulation, criticism, or attention, this quiet confidence can be more unsettling than confrontation. When they no longer have the leverage of your emotional reactions, they feel exposed, powerless, and often furious. In my own life, practicing calm detachment required courage and conscious effort. I began noticing moments when my automatic responses, anger, defensiveness, or attempts at persuasion, only escalated conflict and reinforced their sense of dominance. By pausing, observing, and responding minimally, I shifted the dynamic entirely. Each instance of detachment felt initially counterintuitive. It required trusting that my silence, my calm, and my unwavering presence would communicate far more than words ever could. Over time, I realized that this form of strength was not passive. It was deliberate, intentional, and profoundly empowering. It allowed me to maintain my peace while disrupting the patterns of manipulation that had once dictated my emotional life. Silent strength also transformed my perception of power. I no longer needed external approval or confrontation to assert myself. The calmness I cultivated became a shield against provocation and a beacon of self-mastery. Those who once sought to control me through emotional triggers began to react in ways that revealed their insecurity and need for validation. Their fury was not about me. It was a mirror reflecting the discomfort they felt when they could not dominate or provoke. Observing this without taking it personally reinforced my sense of autonomy. I began to understand that calm detachment is not indifference. It is a conscious choice to prioritize clarity, self-respect, and emotional freedom over the drama of external demands. In practicing silent strength, I also discovered a deeper connection to myself. Each moment of restraint, each choice to observe rather than react, strengthened my trust in my own judgment and emotional resilience. I became less dependent on others to define my worth and more attuned to my internal compass. Detachment allowed me to engage with life on my own terms, to respond with intention rather than impulse, and to protect my energy in ways that were previously unimaginable. The more consistently I practiced this, the more liberated I felt, and the more clear it became that true power does not always announce itself loudly. Often, the quiet presence of someone who knows their worth and refuses to be provoked is the most profound expression of strength, one that challenges others without aggression and preserves peace with unwavering clarity. For much of my life, I lived in the shadow of other people's expectations, tailoring my words, actions, and even my emotions to fit the narrative that others wanted me to embody. I believed that compliance, charm, and appeasement would keep relationships smooth and protect me from conflict. But over time, I began to understand that denying my truth, silencing my voice, and hiding my authentic self came at a high cost. Living inauthentically drained my energy, eroded my self-respect, and left me vulnerable to those who thrived on control and manipulation. Narcissists, in particular, find authenticity threatening because it exposes a reality they cannot dominate. When you claim your truth, you become untouchable in ways that cannot be managed through intimidation, flattery, or guilt. In my journey, owning my truth was not a single moment, but a gradual awakening. I started by acknowledging my feelings, my opinions, and my boundaries without seeking approval or validation. Each time I spoke honestly, even in small ways, I felt a shift in my internal power. There were moments of discomfort, resistance, and even pushback from those who expected me to conform, but I realized that their discomfort was a reflection of my growing integrity, not my failure. Authenticity, I discovered, is not about confrontation or aggression. It is about alignment between your inner world and your outer expression. It is about living with clarity, courage, and unwavering self-respect. Owning my truth also transformed how I engaged with others. I no longer felt compelled to explain, justify, or soften my reality to make it more palatable. This shift was particularly impactful in relationships with narcissistic individuals. Their strategies of manipulation, projection, or criticism rely on the malleability of others. When I refused to bend, when I refused to hide, and when I refused to negotiate my reality to avoid their discomfort, I discovered an inner freedom that could not be shaken. Their attempts to provoke or undermine only highlighted the power I had reclaimed, and I learned that authenticity is a subtle but profoundly effective form of empowerment. It allows you to stand firm without aggression, to engage without fear, and to preserve your peace in ways that reactive behavior never could. Living authentically also nurtures resilience and self-trust. Each decision to honor your values, speak your truth, and uphold your integrity strengthens your confidence and diminishes the influence of those who would seek to control you. I noticed that the more consistently I aligned with my truth, the less the reactions of others dictated my emotional state. Authenticity became a practice of liberation, a daily choice to honor myself over fear, and a shield against manipulation. It is a quiet yet undeniable force that shifts dynamics, empowers personal growth, and creates space for meaningful, balanced relationships, while also exposing the limits of those who cannot tolerate your unshakable presence. In reflecting on the journey of understanding narcissists and reclaiming your own power, it becomes clear that true strength lies not in confrontation or anger, but in self-awareness, boundaries, and emotional independence. The more you learn to stand tall, trust your instincts, and honor your truth, the less influence others, especially those who thrive on control, can have over your life. Your peace, confidence, and clarity are yours to protect, and setting limits is not an act of cruelty, but an act of self-respect. By practicing calm detachment, refusing to feed their ego, and living authentically, you reclaim ownership of your emotions and decisions, creating a life grounded in integrity rather than fear. Healing yourself, prioritizing your well-being, and nurturing emotional independence are acts of courage. Each step away from manipulation, each moment of quiet strength, and each assertion of your truth reinforces your resilience. You learn that personal power is not loud or aggressive. It is steady, unwavering, and rooted in the knowledge of your worth. The journey is not about changing others, but about becoming whole within yourself, cultivating clarity, and walking forward with confidence, compassion, and unshakable peace in reflecting on the journey of understanding narcissists and reclaiming your own power. It becomes clear that true strength lies not in confrontation or anger, but in self-awareness, boundaries, and emotional independence. The more you learn to stand tall, trust your instincts, and honor your truth, the less influence others, especially those who thrive on control, can have over your life. Your peace, confidence, and clarity are yours to protect, and setting limits is not an act of cruelty, but an act of self-respect. By practicing calm detachment, refusing to feed their ego, and living authentically, you reclaim ownership of your emotions and decisions, creating a life grounded in integrity rather than fear. Healing yourself, prioritizing your well-being, and nurturing emotional independence are acts of courage. Each step away from manipulation, each moment of quiet strength, and each assertion of your truth reinforces your resilience. You learn that personal power is not loud or aggressive. It is steady, unwavering, and rooted in the knowledge of your worth. The journey is not about changing others, but about becoming whole within yourself, cultivating clarity, and walking forward with confidence, compassion, and unshakable peace.